Hi, I'm Katie Pocock. Today I'm going to talk to you about my project. Throughout history until modern times, the cultural exchange between East Asia and the rest of the world has spread both a mixture of false and truthful elements. We can see how false information, such as incorrect maps that represented East Asia as much larger, were spread due to the lack of intelligence of how the planet actually looks like. Other false information due to stereotypes or racism have also been spread about East Asian culture. We also see the truth spread, which aids in the rest of the world understanding East Asian culture better and to a higher degree. Due to more modern technology and education, the rate of that truth being spread rather than falsehoods has increased. The misinterpretation of East Asian culture through history until now, due to lack of education, has led to cross-cultural illusions or negative perceptions. First, let's talk about the possibility of people from outside cultures having a cross-cultural illusion of East Asian culture. A cross-cultural illusion is the perception of a different culture than one's own culture in an idealized fashion. So from an outside perspective, if you hold a different culture to a higher standard out of respect or even an obsession, this can be seen as a cross-cultural illusion. This can be due to the person wishing they were a member of the culture or just respecting it to a very high degree. Sometimes a cross-cultural illusion can be due to the fact that they are not informed on the realities of the culture and only have been exposed to that good side. This can be dangerous if they believe that every member of the culture is the same or doesn't face as many challenges due to their culture if that's not the reality. One example of this cross-cultural illusion of East Asian culture is Van Gogh. Due to the lack of education of how East Asia actually is, his interpretation of the land was that it was a primitive land where the people and the artist lived close to nature. His exposure of the culture was limited to what he saw through art, which depicted the natural beauty of the land through flowering trees and beautiful landscapes. He took this limited exposure as the only truth of the land and was convinced that he wanted to travel there and felt burdened by the civilization of Europe. Yet, there are many different kinds of climates, and there was still poverty and all of the bad things about the land that he held up to such a degree but wasn't exposed to. Van Gogh was inspired by the art and techniques of East Asian art, and many details of his work can be found that are a direct result of his love for the culture he saw. In this self-portrait, you can see an example of the element of East Asian culture in the background just above his shoulder. He liked the unusual spatial effects, the expanses of strong color, the everyday objects, and the attention to details from nature. As you can see in this photo, there's a few elements of that, of one of the pieces he created. Here is another example of the elements he took from East Asian art, where we can see the same circular pattern that was influenced by that wave piece. Another prime example of the misinterpretation of East Asian culture causing cross-cultural illusion is through Madame Butterfly. We saw throughout this source how the perception of women was that they were over-sexualized, objectified, and fetishized. These are all ways that the illusion of women in the culture was wrong and dehumanizing. Examples from the book, such as referring to Madame Butterfly as a pretty plaything and refusing to allow her to connect to her relatives, show that the Americans in the story viewed Japanese women as more of an object and fetishized her due to the way she looked and the culture that she came from. This perception was and is very wrong, and leads to East Asian women being treated as unequal to men or even to women of other cultures. The lack of education of why everyone should be treated as equals resulted in this treatment, which was very wrong. when they idealized the woman and had the illusion of them being the perfect East Asian wife that took away from the element of humanity and individualism that each woman holds. So even though this cross-cultural illusion is the outside perspective putting East Asian women on a pedestal, it is extremely detrimental to the woman. Since the reason that they are put on that pedestal is because of the outside appearance and exotic look that East Asian women hold, that some people of other cultures are or were attracted to, and not for who they are as people or the values and the cultures that make them unique and individual human beings. Now, there is also the misinterpretation of East Asian culture where they only have negative perceptions of the culture. Examples of these negative perceptions are portrayed in the novel The Question of Hue, through one of the main characters, Pocock. He repeatedly treated Hugh as lesser than himself and even as a madman. Since Pocock did not understand the culture or past that Hugh came from, he viewed Hugh's action as him going mad, which led to him sending him to a mental hospital where he there stayed for 3 years. Some of the examples that he referred to Hugh as going mad were that he stole a horse, moved his mattress to the floor, and had visions on the boat. Yet each of these examples are explainable. Since Fouquet was very uneducated in other cultures, he did not have the correct lens to see that Hugh was not in fact crazy, he was just different. Hugh did not see a problem with borrowing the horse because it was not being used, and he returned it as soon as he was done. He was not used to the mattress being elevated and felt uncomfortable. And finally, he was on the boat in bad conditions for so long that he got some visions after convincing himself it was such a great opportunity and that God had sent him to spread the religion. Hugh was thrown into a culture that wasn't his own, and he did not act the same way as everyone, which led him to being labeled as crazy. Similar instances outside of the novel led to the term Chinese madness being used. This refers to East Asian men going crazy. The term is a stereotype and a fake racial disease that was created due to the misinterpretation of the culture and the members of the culture. When the term was popularized, it had a negative effect on many Chinese men, since they were automatically categorized as having this Chinese madness, when in reality they were just not used to the culture they were being thrown into and grew up differently. Next, an example of a negative perception of East Asian culture is those who believe in the stereotype that all Asian men are addicted to opioids. Due to the Opium War, there were many people who did become addicted and dependent on the opium drug. This war over narcotics did have a huge impact on the culture and many East Asians, but there was a lot of stereotyping the people into the category of addicts that occurred from the outside perspective. The stereotypes included believing East Asian men in particular were extremely thin and weak due to the drug taking a toll on their body. With the education of those members who were not in that culture, they could have been told how the rate of the addiction decreased, and maybe they would offer to help with the problem instead of creating that false stereotype. And when a horrible stereotype like that is widely assumed about everyone, it can be very hard for those East Asian men. Therefore, many East Asian men decided they wanted to change this view and to take on the sport of martial arts. Through martial arts, they could build muscle and defend themselves, and also their friends from these incorrect stereotypes. In conclusion, the misinterpretation of East Asian culture throughout history until now, due to the lack of education, has led to cross-cultural illusions or negative perceptions. We saw those cross-cultural illusions in the story of Madame Butterfly and throughout the story of Van Gogh. We saw how some people only have negative perceptions through the question of hue and through the stereotypes that came from the opioid war. Both of these examples result from the lack of education and can have a huge impact on the members of the culture and the outsiders' perspectives.